Hey Julian, thanks for taking the time to go through this marketing deep dive. I know we've already discussed what we're going to be covering in the next 30 minutes, but before we jump into it, it'd be great to get a little understanding about you, your background, and specifically your background within manufacturing.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Elliot. Yeah, quick background on me. So I'm the owner and founder of Industrial Growth. We're a marketing agency for manufacturers. Um, what makes us different from other agencies is that we're a team of senior marketers, ex CMOs, former heads of marketing. So we don't hire juniors, and we work with an experienced marketer directly. Quite different from most agencies out there. So we don't need any hand holding. We get stuff done. We show actual results. So that's what a little bit what I'm doing currently. Before that, it's been a while. I was doing marketing at Gorilla 76. They're also an industrial marketing agency, one of the best and one of the most well known out there. Spent 3 years there and ended up leading the strategy department, and then spent some time in the startup and in the tech and startup world as a marketing leader there, and then eventually came back to manufacturing because I missed it, to be honest. So I've been doing industrial growth for almost 3 years now. Been a wild ride, but a good one.
Nice. I guess the way you set up how what makes industrial growth is quite interesting in terms of you saying it's like ex-CMOs and more kind of working on the strategy. It's and a kind of pitfall I come across a lot, especially with manufacturers, that they'll hire someone that might be a marketing manager or even like content manager and expect them to be able to come in with a full marketing strategy for their business. But by the way you've set up how the agency that you run, you seem to be getting at that these manufacturing businesses need a strategy first before they go into like any form of implementation. Is that kind of
Mm.
what you find when you come across a new client when you're starting from zero? How do you kind of like diagnose what's broken with what they're doing, or if they're doing anything? Kind of walk me through that process starting from zero.
Yeah. I'll start with the process in a second, but just to reframe what you said a little bit, because you said they need strategy first, and that's why they shouldn't hire a marketing manager. It's partly true, but there's a lot more to it than just the strategy. Like they need someone experienced, because if you put in a marketing manager, then they're going to either fail on the strategy side or the execution or on the cultural side, like trying to guide the company. Someone who's not been in a more senior position and who doesn't have the confidence is not going to stand up to the president of the manufacturing company and tell them what to do. And that's honestly what needs to happen a lot of the times, to call out problems and to give them a direction and say, this is what we're going to do and this is what we're not going to do, because that's probably the most important thing when you're working on marketing. Is you need to pick a focus and you need to give a direction. And most marketing managers are not, I don't want to put them down because there are a lot of smart people out there, but it just takes time to get to the level of confidence. Some people have it more naturally, others don't. But for me, it just took 10 years of experience and seeing how things work and being confident enough in knowing what I'm doing that I can tell someone who's been running his company for, I don't know, 30, 40 years, to say, this is what you got to do. And if you hire a marketing manager or an agency that hires juniors, which is what most agencies do, you're just not going to get that. You're going to not get a lot of pushback, and those discussions with, the president or the CEO are going to be one of yes sayers and conflict. Yeah. So that's what I'm seeing. And that's why we're going with a senior model, because that's what I think manufacturing companies need. They need someone who tells them what to do and knows what they're doing because they've done it before and they failed often enough to say, no, we're not going to do this. Um, yeah. Should we talk about the diagnosis and the strategy next?
Yeah, I guess once you then kind of grown the authority and are in the room and are confident enough to be able to tell a VP or chairman or owner of the business, what is good for their business from a marketing perspective. How do you then go into the diagnosis?
We just talk about their business, to be honest. So I have a fairly standard process for that at the moment because I tend to ask the same questions. I want to learn about their company, their product. I want to know about how they're selling this product because most manufacturing companies, industrial companies, they're pretty good at sales. They've grown their companies somehow, obviously. So they must be doing something right on the sales side. They're typically pretty good at that. So I try to figure out how are they selling this currently? How are they competing in the market? How are they winning against their competition? What sets them apart? What does their sales process look like? How have they won their last 5 deals? Why have they lost some others? Um, yeah, I just try to dive deep and try to understand what makes their company work the way it does, so I can understand how do we replicate that with marketing. That's really the approach. And then pretty quickly, there will be some mismatch between what's working on the sales side and what's working for the company and what they're doing in marketing. Um, I'll just give you one example. Like I talked to a company the other day who says they're having a lot of success with office visits. Like can't go too much into detail about what they do, but they sell a product, and to sell it to a structural engineer, they need to go to the office and present the product and talk about the product. And they say pretty much every time they do that, it ends up closing and they end up buying. So, but they're spending a lot of time on Google Ads, for example, in that particular area where they're trying to reach the same people. And there's just a mismatch. It's like you're trying to get to a very specific set of people, trying to achieve a very specific thing, but you're running ads on Google where you're basically are advertising to everyone who's trying to look for any kind of product related to this. And you're hoping that out of, 1,000 clicks a month, maybe one of them is the right person and that they might end up booking an office visit with you. That's just a huge mismatch. And there's lots of mismatches like that. Some mismatches are more tactical, like the one I just talked about. Others are more about the story of the company. I work with a company now where their biggest differentiator is that they're small and nimble, and they can treat their customers a lot differently than a corporation can. And they've been hiding that a little bit for a long time because they thought it was a disadvantage because people might be afraid of working with a smaller company. But when you hear from their customers, they say the exact opposite. Like, we like working with you because you actually take care of us, and the product quality is amazing, and you can implement some changes that the big guys just don't want to do because they're too big. They don't really do that. They do off-the-shelf machinery. So there's lots of mismatches like that you find when you start talking about people about their company, and you see what they're doing on the marketing side, and it's not adding up. And after you do it for a while, those mismatches become quite obvious. Um, and yeah, you call them out, and it's a discussion. So I don't come and say, this is everything that's wrong with your company, and this is where you should go. But I try to say more, this is what I'm seeing. Are you seeing that too? And usually when we have that conversation, they say, yes, now that you say it, that is true. And then there's a more tactical component to it too, but that's almost the easy part. Like which channels do you choose, and putting together a go-to-market plan. Like, okay, we're going to run LinkedIn ads, Google ads, but that's almost the easy part, if that makes sense. The strategy up front, figuring out what is the problem and where are the opportunities, is the most fun part and the most impactful part.
How much does you mentioned with one example that customers were saying that that they thought it was a massive bonus that the business was small and nimble and was able to treat them differently. How much are you diving into customer feedback when you're going in, to a business completely fresh, as opposed to what they're telling you around the board table? Or is it an even mix?
I think 5 years ago, I would have said I will never start working with a client unless I talk to customers, for that exact reason. But I think in most cases, you can actually trust what you're hearing from the company leaders. That's been my experience, at least. There are some cases where you do want to talk to customers. Like if it's a very technical product or I don't know. It's hard to describe, but there are some edge cases where I do want to talk to customers, like the one client I just talked about that has a very technical audience that I don't understand very well. It's relatively new for me and for the agency. In that case, I want to talk to some customers. But the tricky thing about talking to customers actually, because in theory, it sounds great, right? Because you want to talk to customers, you want to hear from their mouth. What have they experienced about the product? Why did they buy it? Why did they decide to go with it? You want to hear it in their own words. But in reality, it's a lot more complicated than that. You have to, because there's not just one customer, right? There's a lot of people involved in the decision making. And for one company, the buyer is might be a manufacturing engineer. For another company, it's the owner. And for another company, it's the director of VHS. And this is real experience from a client. So if I talk to three customers, I'm going to get three completely different perspectives about the product and why they bought it. And I might have only done one industry. If I talk to the same person in a different industry, they're probably going to tell me something else too. And if you do that, I think you can still do it, but to get a high level understanding of the business and the customer, you'd have to talk to a lot of people and try to find the common ground between all of them. My clients have talked to hundreds of customers, and they're pretty sharp people, and they see the high level picture and they know the common ground much better than I will ever do after 5 customer interviews. So that's why I usually try to go through the client, because they just know a lot more. They have a lot more context, and I try to extract the knowledge out of them and challenge them if there are some things that don't really add up. You know, hey, you said this thing yesterday. Now you're saying this. How does that add up? That's more my role, trying to understand and reflect to them. Here's what I heard from you, and then dial it in based on that. I find it the more effective method than trying to go through the customers and then only getting little glimpses instead of the whole picture.
So once you've done the diagnosis, is your process from that, is it a similar step-by-step process to build that marketing engine, or is it different depending on whether it's a tactical issue or a messaging issue? What's the kind of process once you've done the diagnosis?
Interestingly, the process is almost always the same. There is some level of website work, because the website is like it sounds a little esoteric, but it's like a manifestation of the entire business online. So if there's a mismatch between the business strategy and what you're doing in marketing, you almost always have to work on the website, because sometimes it just looks unprofessional, and first impression is everything. If you look like a reputable company and your website quality is top notch, that reflects on your entire company, and it reflects on your products. So if your website is mediocre and was built with a page builder, or was made like 20 years ago, what does that say about your business? Not very good things. And that's not a good foundation you want to build on. Sometimes it's about, almost always it's a matter of messaging and how do you still tell the story of their business? Because buyers are still people, right? I think that's something that people tend to forget, is like, we need to rattle off all the technical details and show our shiny machinery, but people are doing business with a company, and they don't want to see a company that looks like all the other companies. They want to know about your company, and no company is the same. So you also need to figure out the story of that company, and how are you going to talk about it, and how's it going to look and feel. You want it to feel like your own and actually reflect what that company is like. So those are probably the three main components. So the look and feel, does it look professional? 2 is the message and the value of your products. And 3 is more of the company story. You know, how are you going to get that across, how you're different from others, and how you work with your customers. So sometimes we work on all 3, sometimes we just work on one. But that's the first step, because that's the foundation for everything. That probably has the biggest leverage for marketing, because the website is just the the point where everybody ends up at some point, whether it's customers, you could upsell, whether it's prospects, whether it's a stalled deal that are coming back, everyone eventually comes back to the website. So it's the biggest leverage for everything else that you're doing.
How do you fix, because it's a real issue I see within manufacturing especially, is kind of the messaging sounding like everyone else. It's almost a safe bet when first building that website. What's your process of developing that messaging and developing a message that actually differentiates that business and helps tell that story?
Frameworks help. I think that's one. We use Fletch PMM. They're actually a company that helps B2B software startups with positioning, but it works for manufacturing just as well. And they have some good messaging frameworks. So it's fletchpmm.com. They're also very active on LinkedIn. You can check those out. I think it's not so much about the process. It is about the process, but it's more about how you go about it. First of all, consensus will ruin everything. So get 3 people in the room at most. It should be the president, maybe a sales leader or some other influential person in your company. And then maybe someone like me, a marketing person, or you can do it internally, but do not bring the entire marketing team, the entire sales team, and everyone into it, because someone will always have a problem with something, and trying to get everyone on the same page is impossible. It is impossible. And getting feedback from customers, one customer will tell you this, another customer will tell you this. You need to decide based on everything the company leadership has a lot of context from customers, from conversations, from employees. They know all this stuff already. And they know that there's never going to be consensus. And that brings me to point number 2 is risk. If you're not willing to take risk, you're not going to have a good positioning. It's just not going to work out. Risk meaning accepting that some people will be turned off by your message. And that's fine, because you don't want to speak to everyone. You want to talk about the things that you're really good at, and maybe even talk about the things that people should not hire you for. Like, I sometimes have conversations with prospects that want to hire me for, I don't know, a positioning project only. And I'm like, that's not what we do. That's not what we're great at. I could probably make them a customer and make some money, but long-term, someone else will be way better and cheaper and faster than me doing a positioning project. What we're really great at is building the entire machine and seeing the whole picture and helping you get from 0 to 1. That's what we're really good at. And having one person that does all of that for you. That's what we're good at. And if you're not willing to take some risk and tell people that, then your positioning is just not going to be very interesting, or it won't resonate with most people. It's just going to blend in with everyone else. There's sometimes, God, I can't count the number of times someone told me, a client told me, well, we can't say that, or we don't want to sound like we only do XYZ, even if that's the only thing they do. Because we might also want to do business with this fringe group that they've done business with once. And, you just have to be willing to take risks. So those are the 2 major components. Aside from the frameworks, which there are millions of out there, it's actually consensus, avoid it like the plague. And 2 is you have to take risk, because otherwise you're going to sound like everyone else.
And I guess going back to your point, that's why it's hard to, as a manufacturing business, the amount of times I've come across a team of 50 and the one marketing person might be someone that has graduated up from being office admin or something like that. It's hard to solve those issues and sit in the room with the chairman and the sales leader and really kind of bash that out without leaning, it's hard to do either of those 2 things if you're an entry-level marketing person.
Yeah, your president says, we're going to bring the entire sales team in for this. Like, who's going to tell him no?
Yeah.
Like, we will tell him no. We're like, that's a horrible idea. Please don't do that. And they will, in 99% of the cases, they will say, yeah, you're probably right. We shouldn't do that. And it's fine. But it's little moments like this where things go off the rails. Like, we're going to bring in the entire company and have them give us feedback on this message. It's like, please don't.
So with say a smaller manufacturing business, or one that's just starting up, like a machine shop or something like that, that doesn't have the benefit of being able to hire a a marketing leader, either on a fractional basis, agency basis, or full time, what's your advice? What would be the kind of minimum viable marketing setup that actually works for a small manufacturer?
You have to do it yourself, and you have to educate yourself. That's the unfortunate answer. And I know it's hard because when you're starting, especially a business like that, I know it's really difficult, and you're already spending like your entire life on the business. But if you can't afford a good marketer, I don't try to cut corners. You're going to need a quarterback in for the Europeans. You're going to need a captain on your team that can direct everything and can give the direction for where things are going and understands the whole picture. And if you try to find like cheap freelancers without having that captain and a quarterback, you're just going to be doing random things. So my recommendation is to educate yourself and learn. There's tons of courses out there. There's tons of great books. Just by talking to people, you learn a lot. Just talk to people for 15, 20 minutes who have done this before, and ask them what's working for them. And then focus. Pick a couple of things. It's realistically, you can probably work on one thing at a time. Maybe pick a couple of things that you're going to work on this quarter and improve on, and don't try to do everything. And freelancers is probably the other good answer, but it's hard to hire freelancers if you don't know what to ask, what you're looking for and what you need. Because there is tons of great affordable talent out there. There's platforms like Fiverr, where there's so much talent. It's incredible, but you have to be able to find it. There are incredibly talented designers who work for very affordable rates from abroad, even from the States. There's great copywriters. There's AI, but you need to be able to have the bigger picture and know what you need to work on. That's the important thing. But I wouldn't try to hire like a cheap marketing manager or an assistant, because they're going to have a lot of time, but you're still going to have to do all the thinking and hold their hand. So it's not very productive, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I think one of the biggest things that a leader that can't afford a marketing strategist or leader can focus on is getting that positioning and messaging right, which you've kind of already spoken about before as some common mistakes. Are there any other kind of really common mistakes that you've seen, other than being maybe overly cautious with the messaging and just kind of saying exactly what they are and keeping it very broad, that you see when you go into manufacturers normally?
There are, it's hard to say if there are common mistakes. The common mistakes are really in the execution, and that really depends on what exactly you're working on. Like Google Ads, every time I onboard a new client and I enter their Google Ads setup, it's immediately obvious that this is not going to work for 10 different reasons. So we don't have enough time to dive into them, but there's a lot of execution problems. Google, especially on the paid side, Google Ads, LinkedIn Ads, if you're doing them, Meta Ads, so Facebook and Instagram, if you don't know what you're doing and it's the first time you're doing it, don't bother, because you're just going to blow money. It sounds harsh, but that's the reality of it. Don't do it unless you really educate yourself and know what you're doing. So there's a ton of common mistakes around that. Another common one is just doing too much. They just think they need to do everything, be at every trade show their competitors go to. They need to have an email strategy. They need to do SEO. They need to post on every social channel that there is. They need to advertise in all the big print magazines. Like they need to do webinars, because like we need to do it all for some reason. because the CEO said it once and nobody has the guts to tell him no. We keep coming back to that issue, but that's one of the big problems. It's just doing everything and like random acts of marketing. Nobody really knows why, because everyone's doing it. And in reality, if you took the resources, the money, the time that you spend on doing all of those things and you focus them on the two most important things, you get a lot better return than if you try to do it all. It's the same for product strategy and product innovation, right? Your product is not going to do everything and your machine isn't going to do everything. You're going to pick a couple things that your product is going to do really well. And that's how you're going to compete against the competition. And I think maybe looking at it from that perspective is a little more tangible for the industrial world, because your machine, your product, it's never going to beat your competition on every single aspect, every single spec. You're going to need to figure out, how is this machine going to be different than the competition? And there's probably going to be 2-3 things that really make it different, although it's not competing on a lot of other aspects, but that's fine.
Yeah, I do have sympathy for kind of manufacturing owners when they're trying to get into marketing and can't afford kind of outside help at that moment, because there's a real shiny thing syndrome, because you can do a lot of different tactics in terms of Google Ads and SEO and now with AI, but if you haven't got done the work to really understand how to meet your customer from a marketing perspective and how to present yourself to them, then you could be chasing your tail for years, really.
I think to give very tactical advice, like if I had to boil it down to a pool of things you should pick from, I'm not saying you should do all of these things, but if you maybe pick from a pool of these, I'm going to say 5 things. Website and messaging is the number one thing. Make sure that's in good shape. You have a differentiated message, and your website looks professional. 2, LinkedIn ads. 3, Google ads. 4, a weekly or every other week email. Very simple. You can write it with AI and talk about something educational or talk about new products. It doesn't have to be crazy. It's just an easy way. It's free to reach people. Be fun, be a little different, talk in your own voice. And 5 is industry publications. So they still have a place. They're expensive as hell. Industry publications, like every industry has their big magazine usually. And they do digital, they do print, and looking to do a couple of big splashes a year instead of the constant little trip is usually what we go for. So pick from those 5, and I think you're in a good spot, and you can ignore a lot of the rest, like posting on your LinkedIn company page. You can ignore that. SEO, it depends, but most companies serve a very specific niche where it doesn't make sense. So pick from those 5 things. And then also don't listen to influencers like me or advisors like me, because you know your company best. So if you have an idea and you feel good about it, you should also ignore people like me, because I'm giving generic advice, and to give you really good advice, we'd actually have to have a conversation. But that's maybe to give a little more tactical advice. I'm not just saying it depends.
No, I think that's great. And it's great advice when, if you had to boil it down into kind of a 2-minute snippet. To finish off, could you maybe walk me through an example that you've done of taking a manufacturer from zero marketing or very broken marketing to measurable results, and what that looked like?
This is a setup. It's a good one. I think most exciting one has been for Guardian Bandsaw. It's also on our website, industrialgrowth.co. We tell the whole story there. They came to us 2 years ago, pretty much in the state that I was describing earlier. They had been doing like random acts of marketing. They worked with some agencies, I think, and freelancers. They were doing some stuff themselves. The website was not in good shape, but they had a really exciting product that was growing a lot, which is vision safety bandsaws, which is really cool. So if you're familiar with bandsaws, they're scary as hell. You put your hand in there on accident, your finger's off, your hand's gone. There's no there is no room for error. And they have this camera system that creates this 3-dimensional safety zone around the blade. And if you get too close to the blade, it stops within 12 milliseconds. So even if you threw your hand as fast as you could into that running blade, it would still stop before your hand reaches it and you wouldn't get hurt. Other than, punching your hand into a stop blade, which probably still wouldn't feel good. But they've never had an accident on any of their machines, ever. No one's ever gotten hurt on their machines, which is incredible. So it's just a matter of putting that onto a website, which we've done, that looks professional and uses a lot of the footage that they have and the visuals that they have, which they had lots of good stuff. And then it was just a matter of getting it in front of the right people. So for them, it early on, it just went Google ads, LinkedIn ads. So very focused. We didn't do a lot. We did nothing else in the first 6 months than Google ads, LinkedIn ads. And if you have a good product that people want, that was enough. So we went after like the biggest meat companies in the US and Canada, I think. And we ran very targeted Google ads just around some of their main keywords. We didn't spend a lot on either channels, but it's working well. And you can check out the numbers on the case study on our website, but they've grown nicely, and it's just been focused execution with them.
I guess, I've seen you talk about this on LinkedIn as well. It does really help when you're marketing a product that is genuinely differentiated and is a very good product to, it's a better product than the competition.
Yeah. I mean, that's the foundation of everything. Honestly, I didn't realize this for many years in my career, but I oftentimes worked for companies where that wasn't the case, both software and hardware. So industrial and in the software space. And it is so discouraging as a marketer because there's just nothing you can do. You can be the best marketer in the world and that company will still fail and you're just not going anywhere. And I did that for many years of my life. And I always thought the problem was me, which is like both emotionally and like from a professional standpoint, it was so discouraging because I always thought like, I don't know what I'm doing. I feel like I'm doing the right things, but it's just not working. And if you have a really great product like Guardian Bandsaw, and I've worked for other companies where the product was exceptional, like so good that it will blow people away when they saw it first. And if you have something like that, you can market you can be a successful marketer, even just doing the basics. So maybe that's another good piece of advice, like focus on product market fit and really differentiating what you've got. And once you're in a good spot with that, this is especially advice for startups. Don't start marketing too soon. Just make sure you have really good product market fit and wait until you can't wait anymore to start marketing.
Yeah, this has been great. Some really good advice and takeaways. Where can people find you if they want to carry on? I've mentioned your LinkedIn. Where can people find you? Throw out some links.
Some links. Industrialgrowth.co. There's no M. That's intentional. I couldn't afford the .com at the time, so it's .co. Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. Yeah, that's probably where I spend most of my time and post stuff about marketing and manufacturing. So yeah, those two things. If you want to do business with me, you can also shoot me an email. Let's assume that's not the case on this podcast. So let's stick with those two links.
Right. Thanks, Julian. It's been great.
Thanks for having me, Elliot. Likewise.
Cheers.